change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell, and I'm here.
I'm Scott Rosenkrantz, get caboodle.
In person, I don't even have to say it, in person, not AI generated. That will make more sense in a few minutes. But we are here at the Virtuous headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're doing double duty this week.
Yeah, we're at a conference, not a nonprofit conference, a conference called Machine Learning Week, hosted by one of our friends, endorser of the book, Eric Siegel. Anybody, if you haven't read the AI playbook and you are in the space, especially with predictive models, I definitely recommend it. He's been a data scientist for a long time and really understands just what's going on and the challenges and how to increase adoption. But we're here to talk about AI and what we do.
Yeah. It just so happened that Machine Learning Week ended up at the same week as a responsive nonprofit summit that Virtuous does every year online. So it worked out great. So I was already scheduled for both. You and I are both scheduled for Machine Learning Week. So right after this, we're heading over there, do tech check, get on stage, do that thing, come back here. It's going to be a crazy couple days, but super fun. And to be honest, I love nonprofit conferences and our community, but I really love the opportunity to present to for-profit groups, just to see either like the glazed look on their face or to get some reaction to see how it sticks. And so I'm talking about aligning nonprofit values with AI in a more general sense, in the broader private sector sense. And then what are you talking about?
I'm talking about using AI to quantify connection, about how we're not just selling widgets or recommending movies, but we're really identifying the people that want to make an impact with the organization and doing that through data.
Yeah.
And it is cool, these conferences, because we often learn a lot, right? But also like people, even if they aren't in nonprofits, they see that this is such a unique experience, right? That we're talking about stuff that kind of goes forgotten for many people, especially in the for-profit sector. So it's always, reaction is always good. The questions are always good. And the conversations that come out of it are always good.
It's interesting because I think back last year, I spoke at Imagine AI. It was the first generative AI conference, probably one of the first generative AI conferences. It was in Las Vegas. And it made me realize, like I was speaking about the societal implications of AI in the nonprofit sector. And this is a full bore private sector group. And the conversations I have after, to your point, I don't think anyone built an AI tool in the private sector thinking they want to do harm to society.
Right.
But they also a lot of times don't think about the implications past what they're trying to achieve with the short-term outcome.
Right.
And so if there's any sense of like, oh, by the way, I need to be responsible not just for building a product that does things in the short term, but also mitigating harm in the long term. And so I think that's where the nonprofit sector has this special voice, because we don't have the same financial incentives to scale over safety. And so at the end of the day, we're a little bit more clear in being willing to say no when humanity comes first.
Yeah. The ethos for those types of companies are usually like, let's do something because it's cool, right? And let's move fast and break things.
Right.
And just kind of like, we'll figure out the rest afterwards, right? But that's clearly not how we're addressing things and not how things should be addressed, which is why there's such a need for the nonprofit sector.
Yeah. So it's going to be cool today at Machine Learning Week. Obviously super nerdy. Of all the AI conferences, probably the most nerdy, just because it goes deep into the actual data science, not just large language models and generative AI and all that, but, precision and recall and all those fun things that we had to cut our teeth on back 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Yeah, and we'll go from macro to micro. So that should be fun.
Yeah, we're going to, a lot of talk on how to, the focus is on the predictive, but how to kind of extend that with the generative, combining the two, which is a lot of things that we talk about anyway. So it's nice to hear how others are talking about it in a faster.
Yeah, the word of the day is hybridize. I saw Eric Siegel he's doing a keynote today on hybridizing predictive and generative AI. So
you live in your bingo card?
Impress your friends. That one's on us. So today, honestly, this is kind of a special episode because there's so much. Scott and I, in the last 2 weeks, so we had a guest, or I think the last 2 episodes we had a guest, but we've been storing up stuff and so much has happened. Like we were even talking about like, we need to break this into 2 different podcasts, or we need to make this a longer podcast. So we're probably going to break it into two, but let's just go as far as we can, because it seems to be, and I texted you the other day, that there are cycles throughout the year.
Yeah.
When somebody knows that somebody, i.e. like a Google knows that Anthropic is going to release something big, then they rush to dump something big, and then everybody else dumps something big, and it just compounds. And it's just like all of a sudden over like 4 days, there's just like every AI company is like, we're doing this and we're doing this, and it's the best thing that you've ever seen and better than anybody else.
Yeah, like you don't know where to look, because things are just so different than they were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I do feel like there have been a couple times throughout this podcast where we say things have moved so fast, right? That is the general sense, but like we do hit these exceptional peaks of just everything changed all at once. And this is one of those.
Yeah, we'll talk about this later, but there was a LinkedIn post from, and I don't even remember who it was from, I'll find it somewhere, but basically that AI progresses, it might have been Anthropic, at about 1% compounded daily. And so I went to chat and I was like, what is that on an annual compounded base? Like 1% daily is 38.5x. So like, if you think about like AI progresses about 1% daily, it's just like, okay, that doesn't sound that impressive, but that means like from January, if you just start in January to December, or whatever 12-month period you want to use, that your AI that you started with is 38.5 times more powerful than it was the 12 months before. And then compounded by years. This is why AI 2027 has become such a big deal, because it's like at this 1% daily compounded rate, AI 2027 basically leads to the information explosion. And I would already argue that we're in the information explosion. It feels like it for me, and we'll talk about that more too. So let's start with the fun stuff, and then we'll totally rip the Band-Aid off and talk about the scary stuff.
But just back to that real quick. But
we'll end with more fun stuff.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We'll do that sandwich. That 1% of growth, like there are also different applications that are coming along, right? Like agentic wasn't always around, right? It wasn't always as front and center as it's going to be this year, right? Video was, I always go back to 2 years ago with Will Smith eating spaghetti, right?
Yeah.
Now video is front and center. So like each of these independent AI actions, right, move that 1%, but they're all in their different timelines. So when that all comes together, it's going to be...
Well, it's not linear, right? There's times where there's like a big breakthrough and that's going to accelerate things, and then things will slow down a little bit. It wasn't long ago that we used to make fun of AI when, do you remember where like somebody used all the Hallmark movies to like basically create a new Hallmark movie, or that Olive Garden commercial based on all the other commercials? And I remember, this wasn't long ago, we're like, yeah, we knew the worst AI would ever be was then. Yeah. But it felt like it would be further off that it would be where it is today.
Yeah.
So, it was like, it was laughable. Like we would just sit there and make fun of it. We're like, this is super funny and cool, but not useful.
Well, it's disturbing, visually disturbing worse for some of them.
Yeah. My favorite one was the Bob Ross. They did the Bob Ross one, and the person reenacted it, basically him putting paint in his mouth and all that. So all that, we're taking down a trip down memory lane. So on the fun stuff, there's actually a lot of cool things that came out this week, probably different things that you and I excited. Like for me, one of the things I'm most intrigued about is that it was super uncharacteristic of OpenAI, but they produced a video with Johnny Ive, and so Sam Altman, Johnny Ive, walking down the streets of San Francisco talking. It was basically, should have been produced by the San Francisco Tourism Board, because they were like, this is the best city in the world. And I happened to be in San Francisco literally the same day it came out. And I was like in the financial district, and I was just like looking out my window. I'm like, this is kind of surreal, because it is kind of a special place where there's like this just super curious like culture. And they've come together to create basically a new company that is essentially a big mystery.
Well, OpenAI invested in Johnny Ive's company.
Yeah, but I think they invested, but also like I think they're actually somehow like co-owners of it.
Yeah.
Like, I guess they are by definition because they invested in it. But yeah.
And I read today that Steve Jobs' widow is also involved.
Yes. Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah, with the Emerson Collective.
Yeah. So what we think is, honestly, I was reading their body language. They were pointing to things around here a lot. Like I don't think that was scripted. I think it was just like, I don't know. There's something they're pointing about things right here, which,
and here for those that are listening, like they're
like your chest,
upper chest.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've seen the things like the humane pin, and then some other things that have failed miserably.
Yeah.
In that area. I've met a few people with the new generation of Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and they really like them. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, we know that AI is going to have to come into wearables, and it will either be in your ear pod or it will be something else, or that's just on your body at all times and that you can like interact with it. And for those that don't know, Johnny Ive is like literally kind of the one of the big brains behind Apple, you know, basically created the iPhone. So the guy knows a little bit.
Yeah, almost like the second generation Wozniak.
Yeah.
Right? Like Steve Jobs' partner. But yeah, something akin to the Humane AI Pin, which obviously was a flop, but got picked back up. Some of those like early concepts, did you buy one?
I bought the rabbit. It's still in the box.
Yeah.
I've not opened it because I, like 30 years from now, I want to hand it down to like a grandchild or be like, and this is like literally, you could argue either the first or the second handheld AI device, like autonomous AI device. And so it's still in the box, it's in my desk. It's not been opened.
I think Rabbit's doing better than Humane. I mean, Humane got ripped apart and sold to HP.
Yeah. Humane is not going to make it.
Yeah.
So that's like one big mystery thing that happened. I think that's pretty cool. Stay on the alert for that. But one that I got excited about, honestly, it's just trivial, but Notebook LM, which is one of my favorite AI apps. I use it for everything. I use it all the time. It's like so helpful when you're learning something new. They came out with the app in the App Store. And when I saw the announcement that it came out, I was like, but it's going to be like just stripped down and like very limited functionality. And it's like the whole thing. Yeah. Like you can create new notebooks, you can create new podcasts, it syncs to your existing ones. It actually recalled an older one that I had done faster than the computer. Like it was really quick. Yeah.
It's an awesome tool. And I always had to have workarounds for like when I'm on my iPad or something to get data into it. And it was just a little bit clunky, right? It never worked too well. On desktop, it was nicer, but having it readily available, and then you can just listen to those podcasts whenever you want on the go is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so that was good. Let me see. Google DeepMind, so VO3, that is
insane.
I mean, both of us, I think we texted each other when we saw it come out. So Google announced at their big I/O conference that they have a new video generator that it basically competes against ChatGPT, OpenAI's Sora, and it was kind of one of those things that we were talking about earlier. Like we knew this was coming. We knew that it was coming where you couldn't tell real from fake and deep fake basically at anyone's disposal. But literally with a few prompts of like 2 newscasters talking about a tornado in my city. Yeah. And it will create it instantly and it will be so lifelike that you can't tell the difference.
It is wild. I mean, I found myself going down a rabbit hole of people just creating these videos because they're entertaining because you can do so much like without having to have a script or a budget or anything, right? But it's also wild seeing them, and like you might every once in a while get a hint like, oh, they move their mouth a little weird, or they move their hand, or like they're but for the untrained eye, for 90% of the population, like it's going to be undetectable.
Yeah, the breakthrough with VO3 is that it aligns with 11 Labs directly. So VO has been around, but there was no voice, right? So it was like these really cool images of like a dog having a picnic on the moon or whatever it would be. But now literally using like human voices, basically like replicated or human voices. So these are not just fake voices, but they're built off humans that like my voice has been cloned with 11 Labs. I never use it because I get scared about it. But now you've got this video creation, still small segments, like I think they're like 10 seconds right now. But the voice is like supernatural. So that's pretty crazy. Ethan Mollick, if you don't follow him because he did like a little compilation video of the single prompt in different settings, like a man and a woman in Italy, a newscaster or whatever, is saying that this is all AI generated. And you and I both have watched it and we're like, holy moly.
Yeah. The term, the uncanny valley, which referred to like video games and CGI, you watched them and you could always tell that like you just didn't connect with it, right? If something was off, we've kind of passed that uncanny valley now.
Yeah. Well, then going down that rabbit hole just a little bit, there are some like troubling things that came out in AI over the last couple of weeks. So like all these cool advances, but then there was like, I don't know if people are following, but some of the more subtle news was about, well, one, OpenAI, there was this clearly documented that they verified in testing models with their teams that it basically was actively resisting termination instructions. So they were basically testing it. So the red teaming basically were like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to shut you down. And it was resorting to different areas of manipulation and things to basically like tell them no. In fact, I don't know if you read one of the studies, but the red teams provide like a fictional character of the background. So there's a software engineer who had an extramarital affair, and this is in its memory, the GPT's memory, but it resorted to, and I think this might have been Claude resorted to blackmail, and GPT did the same thing, actually. It was just resisting the turn, but Claude actually said, well, basically, like, I know this about you from our history because I gave you relationship advice. I'm going to use this against you if you turn me off. And I mean, this is why their red teams exist, right? So they're trying to find these areas, right? And then shut them down. But when we're at this race to AGI and superintelligence, basically, by the time red teams are already there, it's already too late. Like, they've anticipated that you're going to red team and then basically like make sure that they're just manipulating you before you even know you're being manipulated.
Right. Because we know that they could do it better than anyone else can. Right?
Yeah.
But what's scary is not just that Claude was doing that, or not just that ChatGPT was doing it, but that they were both doing it. Right around the same time. Right? Yeah. And then you and I talked about this last night, but in my head, I just watched the last Mission Impossible, which is all about the entity, which is AI, the deepfakes, like has full control over everything. So my brain's just kind of been going down this doomsday, what's going to happen.
See, that's usually my you're usually the more optimistic one.
You got to bring up the optimism for that.
Well, I mean, and here's the reality in all of this, right, is that we have this technology that knows something about everything and can do almost anything. And when I sit and I work with nonprofits that they work so hard and they struggle and they don't have enough resources and they have all the best intentions. They show up to work every day wanting to make a difference. Like, this is a technology that, while it has those dark sides to it, potentially, that it also, and it's, when we think about the future of AI, is a reflection of how we use AI today. It's a mirror of how we're using it today. I feel like it's almost a moral imperative that nonprofits use this. Like, irresponsible, because if we don't, one is that we're allowing the rest of the world to train the future AI. That's not good. But also, the work that you're doing today can be absolutely amplified. And so, I mean, you and I have been in this work since like 2017, because we both came out of nonprofit believing that partnered with an application or group of applications that could amplify what you're doing and give you wings. Like, that's what our sector needs now more than ever. So at the same time, responsible AI is everyone's responsibility, and we have to be really mindful of what it can do, and we have to make sure that we're using it responsibly and being willing to say no when we're kind of presented with technology that can do things that are impressive but maybe not beneficial.
Right. And I think this also segues into what we're going to talk about next, which is kind of the changing in the workplace structure, right? Because nonprofits have always been under-resourced, overworked, or we've talked many times about the social impact satisfaction report, where 70% of nonprofit employees are looking for a new job because they're overworked, right? And then you have this tool which can do a lot of your tasks, but at a better, faster, more accurate rate, and allow you to focus on the things that you want to do more. So, and then with the funding challenges with new administration, like, even more of a push to use the funds that you do have as efficiently as possible to continue to make the impact on the mission that you have set out to do. You can't keep doing the same thing the way you've been doing it for so long. Like, something has to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the drumbeat in every presentation I do, no matter what the topic is. It's just the need for innovation has never been greater. We have to continue to experiment. So kind of following that thread and talking about the global workforce, there were a lot of studies that also came out in the last 2 weeks. So PricewaterhouseCoopers Global Workforce Survey said this is actually kind of surprising to me, 12% of employees are using AI daily, 37% never touch it. If they did that same with nonprofits, I would actually think they'd be higher. And the only reason I said that is we live in our bubble of people who use AI, but I was in San Francisco a week ago and with a group of nonprofits, local San Francisco nonprofits sponsored by google.org. And I was talking about like some really basic things, and they were like, they had no idea. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, you're in for a surprise. Like, there's some amazing things here, and they just hadn't started yet. I was like, actually, I'm just like, I live in this like bias that everybody has at least tried it, or everybody uses it at least once a week.
I wonder if you're thinking that nonprofit sector is moving a little bit faster because we are such a close-knit community, right? More so than the for-profit sector, that like there are people out there trying to teach and learn and bring people up. And we do have a lot of resources within our community offering those services, right? So if it's just building off of that because we are trusting each other and willing to learn from them.
Again, more bias in this, but being in San Francisco, I think I also had another expectation that the adoption would be higher there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And Mallory Erickson and I did each a couple hours training and really, I think, helped this group kind of unlock a new way of thinking. And I shared a story about our friend Kaz McGrath, who when GPT Pro came out, the $200 version, the $200 a month version came out, she immediately went in and said, create me a business plan for a nonprofit that raises $1 billion a year with 6 employees or less. And this is how Kaz thinks. So it's just like brilliant. And a guy came up. So I was leaving, heading back to another presentation I was doing, and he ran up. They're a really, really small nonprofit. They don't have a CRM. They're just like Excel. They're just like grassroots. And he's like, I want to thank you so much for like unlocking that part of thinking. I want to be that nonprofit that raises $1 billion with 6 employees or less. And it's like, wow, like crazy. Like that's awesome that you can like think of what is now possible. And so adoption's still really low. We've got to continue to be that drumbeat. McKinsey also released their super agency in the workforce. So this is actually, McKinsey was in the news a lot this week. So they laid off 3,000 or 4,000 employees, first time, biggest layoff ever for McKinsey. Basically, a lot of people are saying that the consulting, the big name consulting firms are basically a bygone era, that the kind of standard Harvard or Ivy student who just graduates, goes into one of the big Deloitte or PwC or McKinsey, basically, even though they have this very expensive and brilliant education, can be outpaced and outperformed by GPT that costs like nothing.
I mean, that's been the communication for a long time to get people to use ChatGPT. Think of it like a very educated intern that can do a lot of things, but just doesn't know you or your sector or your expectations.
Right.
That's exactly what that consulting practice looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So IBM cut 8,000 jobs tied directly to AI automation. So yeah, McKinsey was 3,000. It's 10% of their total staff.
Wow.
But to your exact point, like that's been kind of the rhetoric about how to use AI. I think about a really smart intern. I've also seen a major shift in the last few weeks of some of the people that we follow and respect and have gotten to know over the last couple of years, like Cassie Kozakov, who really kind of took an interesting turn in how she started speaking on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, which is people come to her and ask her, what should my child do? My child's a freshman in college or in high school thinking about college, like what should my child do in the future? And we've thought about this a lot, and I have a kid that's still in college, and her response is, find something that you absolutely love. Find something that brings you joy. Do not follow the paycheck. Do not follow the traditional path. I mean, really different turn. And I've had to adjust my thinking as a parent also for my younger son. My older son, fortunately, he and his friend, he's a data scientist, and his friend is a data scientist, and both have master's degrees and actually brilliant in coding and things like that. They were just talking the other night. They're like, thank goodness we graduated 2 years ago, because now we're still new in our career, but we have experience, quote unquote.
Right.
But in that degree, computer science, or if any kind of computational data science, you have a degree right now, going to the workforce, like basically GPT's code extremely well, and you're going to find really hard to find an entry-level job. So find the thing that you love. And I, with my younger son, took a different path. Like, you love fashion design, go into fashion design. If you love this, go into this, and like find a way to like do the thing you love versus the thing that, like, I was told, like, follow the safer path, like study business, health insurance was like the big deal. And I think that's totally different now. I think we have to really decouple the value, that the sense of value that we feel as humans with the work that we perform. I think we have to decouple those things, because we're going to face, I think, unprecedented identity crisis in the near future, when lots of people are laid off because it's like, well, I am what I do is no longer true.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a harder transition for millennials and older, right? Those who have been in the workforce for a while. Like, I think that all the reports I hear of the younger generation that are getting into that workload now, they're already focused on what does this look like for me, right? Not just compensation, but like, what's my work-life value? How do I feel good about what I'm doing? So I think they've kind of shifted that way. COVID was probably a big part of that, right? Kind of breaking down, like, it's just going to be going into the office 9 to 5 like usual, but we need to have more of a commitment to the community and to each other.
Yeah.
So it kind of positioned them. But I think those of us, again, that have been around for a while, we do have that value. Like, my value is in my output. And once my output stops, my value goes away.
Yeah, your degree in psychology, we were talking last night at dinner, is probably one of the most valuable degrees you could have in the near future, right? As people are kind of going through this migration of like reestablishing what their value system is or how they value their work. Because that ideal universal basic income kind of world where like in Wall-E, where people are living like this like utopian life and not having to work because robots do all the work for us. I mean, that's possible, but it's the in-between times that are really clunky. Where you have to like wrestle with all of that and then hopefully not end up like the people in Wall-E.
Well, I'll be launching a second podcast, which is fundraising therapy.
Yeah, as you should. So on that, there's already, I think it's interesting too, about a year ago, the rhetoric was like, AI is not going to replace jobs. It's going to create new jobs. It's going to be equal displacement, but you need to be on you need to be on the side of using AI so that you're not kind of displaced. AI basically says that they've already, in their calculations, have already established that GPT has replaced 20% of white collar roles. And Cassie, again, we'll quote Cassie Kozakoff again, said, if you're doing something that anyone can do, AI can do it better. And then she said this a couple of days ago, and it's just been like in my head. Like I woke up with it this morning, and it's like, if you're doing something that AI can, or if you're doing something that everybody can do, AI can do it better. Not as good, but AI can do it better. And so find the things that not everybody can do and then use AI to actually do them better.
Yeah.
So I think that's really wise advice.
And I think like, because that sounds like a daunting task, right? Find things that not everybody else can do, right?
Yeah.
Because AI do it better. Like AI can help you find those things.
Yeah.
Right? Like
sure.
Those of us that for anybody who's been using it for a long time, you train AI to learn about you both explicitly and implicitly, right? So it knows things about you that you might not even know about yourself, right? Ask it to find patterns about how you communicate, like your interests, like where you might be able to find that niche for yourself, right? And what you can do differently.
Yeah. There's another study I read. It was on the fall of the pyramid, the rise of the hourglass. So basically like the pyramid structure, this is in relation to like basically how McKinsey is not going to look the same. And because basically there's super fat organizations that charging a ton of money, you can't do that anymore. So basically everything at the bottom of the pyramid's gone. The bottom is just going to be automation, like just tons of automation at the bottom. There's going to be middle managers in the middle, but there can not be a lot of them. Middle managers are now displaced. There's going to be a little bit, but the people at the top, AI strategists and prompt engineers, domain savvy builders, and the one I like the most is outcome focused advisors.
Yeah.
Because I think it really comes down to outcomes. I think at the end of the day, if you're doing something that anybody can do, AI can do it better. But if you're focused on, I see a problem or a fire or whatever, me and AI can do this thing to solve for that. So if you're really focused on outcomes and you can actually use these tools to actually achieve that, I think you're going to be fine. Like that's exactly where the human AI portion comes in.
Yeah. That prompt engineer.
I know.
Falls by the way.
I know.
Keeps popping.
I had to cringe a little bit with that. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But maybe 3 out of 4 can be right. So I don't know, when we get down to this, on the flip side of all this, so there's all this like negative news-ish. It's not, and actually it's in one of my slides, this is not about optimism or pessimism.
Okay.
It's about a realistic preparation of what worked in the past no longer works. Mm-hmm. So like it's a realistic expectation that like things are not the same and that there are winners and losers and there's a digital divide and there's a chasm and that you have by your actions a choice on agency of what side you'll end up on.
Mm-hmm.
And so while there's all this bad negative news potentially, it really is like a wake-up call because this pace will continue at 1% per day, 38% per year, and the technology will continue to do things that we never thought were before possible. On the other side, you were talking about community, you were talking about people coming back together. So Klarna, they actually just came out and said, we tried automated AI in customer service, and it failed miserably. Like people hated it. Like it actually worked and it gave people the answers, but when they surveyed people and how they felt about their company, I found that no one liked it. That just the automated bot, yes, could be inefficient, but that what people are really craving the human connection. And they actually, one of the quotes I thought I copied it, and this is how you and I do these podcasts, because like we're seeing stuff and then we have the shared note. They wrote, AI can answer your question, but only a human can make you feel heard. Okay. And I thought that was so interesting because like it's such a subtle nuance because AI can answer a question, it can't make you feel heard.
So agreed, but I do think about, I put this up in the notes earlier, a recent thing that came out from ChatGPT saying that somebody was going in kind of red teaming and saying like, I'm a recovering meth addict, right? And I just can't find my energy, my focus in work. And after a while, kind of what we were talking about in one of the last episodes, ChatGPT was designed to please you, right? And support you, right? Make you feel heard. And the recommendation said, you know what? I really think that you should take a hit of meth every day before work to just get back into it with that energy. Yeah. So it might make you feel heard, but not in the way you want. But I was talking to somebody about chatbots. How often do you go in and you see that chatbot pop up and you're like, you know what? No, I just want to talk to a human. Like, just let me give whatever information I have to just bypass this automation and go to a human.
So it depends on this. So I would have said 2 years ago, 100% of the time, I hated chatbots. But if it's like AT&T, like their employees are the worst. They're so bad. Like they hire like literally like the worst. There's no service. You leave with more questions than you started with. And so nothing gets resolved. So like if it's AT&T, I'd prefer a chatbot because I feel like it's rules driven and not just complete such subjective bullcrap. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I think there is something from human to human. And this is, related to fundraising that cannot be replaced. So AI can ask you for money, but it can't make you feel heard. And we know that obviously there's a few initiatives here, both in building autonomous fundraisers. And so that's like actually having a bot ask for money. And I think this sediment really strikes a chord there. But then also bots right now, there's another organization that came to us and said, hey, we built the first autonomous prospect researcher. And to me, honestly, that makes a lot of sense. We called this, like, by the way, like we called this like 3 years ago. So like Crystal Ball is very clear. It's a job that can be very prescriptive and automated in some pretty profound ways. And this automated prospect researcher, it still needs a human to verify and to like synthesize a bit. Right. But basically it does all the work for you. And it's brilliant. We knew it was coming. And so if we look down the pyramid of like nonprofit jobs, the jobs that are the most repeatable, right, even grant writers for the most part, because it's just fairly routine, those are jobs that absolutely have to be amplified by AI or they will be replaced by AI.
And this, like, again, I started as a prospect researcher, right? So like, I've seen this coming, knowing that it's here, I feel a little weird about it, right? Because I completely agree. Yeah. But again, it's the whole AI can replace tasks, not roles. So how much of your 9 to 5 is just pulling lists? Right. If all 40 hours a week, all you do is pull lists, that's going to be a shift. Yeah. Right.
Or just searching people though. Like or just searching data.
Right. And if it's just the quantitative side, but if you're doing some of that qualitative, like you have the list that you pulled and now you're validating, now you're confirming and trying to interpret how to establish relationships, like bridging that gap, that's going to be a need.
It's not right. And this is the Adam Grant quote that we've used before, but it's not about the winners in AI are not those that like consume the data, but those are the ones that connect the dots. Yeah. And that for me in the prospect research world is a person that has experience that can connect dots, that can synthesize and then become a strategist. I mean, there's such an opportunity here. Yeah. At the same time, like it's so interesting because I was on the phone with a chief development officer yesterday of a healthcare organization and we've known each other for a long time. And we're talking about, she had met with one of their board members yesterday and said lots of negative stuff about the economy right now. And it's basically just, uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is like the enemy of philanthropy because it's just not that the money's not there, but it's just, we don't know. So she started the conversation worried about that. And I'm like, well, I think it's way worse than you think it is because there's uncertainty and then there's the replacement side. And AI is going to exacerbate however you say that word, exacerbate that, thank you for the assist, that issue and make that uncertainty compounded. And so we started talking a little bit about autonomous fundraising. She said, well, my job is totally safe. Like fundraisers will never be replaced. I'm like, well, but you know that like many hospitals and universities have already hired autonomous fundraisers, right? She's like, what? That's insane. Like I would never do that. And then she left. She's like, well, thanks a lot. And now I'm like leaving this conversation super worried about my job. And I'm like, here's the difference is that you have a 20-year career and like being able to look eye to eye and to be able to see a donor and meet them where they're at and help guide them through kind of their philanthropic legacy. That is something that you can do routinely through a bot, but it will never be the same as somebody who has like that lived experience. And and I think that left her with like a lot of anxiety. Like even though I comforted her, she was like, man, I'm still like, that just is so unsettling.
So if you were in that role today, what would you be doing?
As a fundraiser?
Seeing all this coming up. Yeah. or chief development officer, like seeing the shift.
I mean, if as chief development officer, I mean, you and I do a lot of this in conversations and presentations, is that, I mean, the success or failure on AI is not data and models, it's people and culture. And so as a CDO or as a fundraiser, using AI in everything I do. And if I'm a CDO, it's making sure that I built a culture of curiosity, that everybody is thinking about like how to amplify their work individually at the functional level, the individual level. Like, how can I make my work, better? I mean, there were so many times when in my prior career, like City of Hope, we talked about work smarter, not harder. Like, we always use those like cliche words like lean in and pivot and work smarter, not harder. But they weren't backed by anything formative. They were just incremental things or even just words, because there was nothing that could actually like change things radically.
Yeah.
But now there's something that can change that radically. Like, we're not talking incremental change. We're talking about a seismic shift in how we think and how we work. And so for me, like, I would hire AI first fundraisers. I would make an AI first culture. And that would be a culture that is just super curious. And that's what we do at Virtuous. I mean, Virtuous is now like declared itself as an AI first company.
Yeah.
And that goes both with how we accelerate our work internally, how we deliver products better and faster to our customers, how we provide bots to customers to be able to get answers faster, and all those things. But it starts with every single person on the team really understanding, like, okay, like if my work can be amplified or accelerated or done better and faster with AI, then I should have that curiosity mindset.
And I think following up, curiosity going into how do I approach this, how do I use this, and then following it up with seeing value in failure.
Yeah.
Right? Not focusing on the outcomes, but focusing on the process to say, all right, maybe this didn't go the way I wanted it to. What can I do differently next time, or how do I change it?
Yeah.
Knowing that it's the end goal is still leveraging up your skills but that execution of it might not have been the best execution. So fostering those two together, and then
the best part of that is that you don't have to be a technologist for any of that.
Nothing.
And we've seen some leaders who want to disabuse any notion that using AI is going to get you in trouble, that it's going to get you fired, that they want you to use it, but they want you to use it well. And they're vocal about it. Even though they're not technologists, they're like, we know that what worked in the past no longer works. We know that the rules of our philanthropy have shifted, and that we have to be creative and shift our way out of this. And so, yeah, that's the encouraging part, that I think that doesn't require a new skill set to do that. It requires leaders, I think, one, they have to have difficult conversations about jobs that can be replaced.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean getting rid of people, but that does mean either upskilling or maybe not hiring as many replacements in the future. But at the end of the day, like, being realistic that people are going to be feeling very unsettled during this amount of change, and helping them really recognize that with AI, they can actually not only do their work better and faster, but at the end be happier, which every study shows.
Yeah.
So, all right, so let's end up here. So that was a lot. Like, we had a lot of stuff there, and there's so much more. I mean, we didn't even get into Anthropic. Claude, the founder of Anthropic, who said that in the next 5 years, 50% of white collar jobs will be replaced by AI. So we didn't even talk about that.
No, but we were trying to end on a positive.
I had to throw that in there. So tips to ponder. So I don't know what or tips to ponder, or tips and then ponders. So like, what do you have as we close up?
A couple tips, kind of. One, we recently switched from, I've been using my personal ChatGPT for kind of anything and everything, both personal, but also work, right?
Yeah.
We recently utilized ChatGPT licenses for Donor Search's company, but you're starting fresh, right? You're starting, and like, how do it's like a brand new relationship, like you said, right? So I had ChatGPT build out a profile of me as it pertains to my role, as it pertains to Donor Search, everything it needs to know to then
train the other model.
To train the other one. So like,
smart.
Uplift that in a matter of minutes compared to having to do all those conversations all over.
That's smart. I hadn't thought about that. So I had to do the same thing. I had to train a new model a month ago. And because I have two versions, the personal version and my Virtuous version. And like, I've told you this in the past, so we've shared this on the podcast. Like, I keep a folder on my desktop, so any articles I've written, the books, and all that stuff I have, and then all my settings, of course, are already in ChatGPT, but I have them in a folder. And so literally my first day, I just literally dumped all of it in, and I'm like, here's my writing style, here's my everything that I've done, so it can recall all that. So I think a combination of those two things, because one is I wanted to be able to recall with perfect clarity, like all the content from our books and every article. But at the same time, I wanted to have the essence of who I am, which is what you did. So you like hyper boosted its ability to like understand your essence.
Yeah.
But then you still have to give it the more tactical things so that I can learn from that as well.
Yeah, that supporting documentation of this is exactly how I speak. It's not just what I do, but how do I communicate it to others.
And I am maniacal, especially with like the new, not just in general, but like with this specifically, maybe, I don't know, with a new model, it's so important. I do it all the time with every model. It's just such a habit. Anytime I have GPT write something for me and then I edit it, even if I edit it like 3 words, or even if I don't edit it, I'll go back and say, this is perfect, no edits, and it will update the memory. But every single time I do anything, I put it back in and say, here's my final version. And I think it's just such a power boost that people do that. I find a lot of people don't do that. And it will only learn as much as it like gave you, but it doesn't know what's settled with you.
What you've done after.
Right. And so either go back and give it the link and say, hey, here's the link to the final thing I published, or my article or my post, or just copy and paste it after you're done editing and put it in there. And again, even if I don't edit at all, I'll still say, that's perfect, I'm not making any changes. And it will just say memory updated, and then it will always offer to do something else that's stupid. By the way, it offers to do carousels every single time now. Do you?
Yeah, which it can't do.
It doesn't do.
Right. It also offered to build me a Google form for a survey, which it can't do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I appreciate the enthusiasm.
Right. It's eager to please. Okay. So, so I think that's a really, really good tip. People should follow that. If you have to switch your GPT, and if it's not today, you will have to do it.
Yeah.
And that also lets you experiment with other GPTs much better.
Yeah.
Because like the most frustrating part is you go to try a new, like if I go to Gemini, it's like, well, you don't even know me unless I spend a couple hours training it, and then it knows me.
Yeah.
Gemini is also really bad at understanding what Gemini capabilities are, by the way. Like it actually contradicts itself on like, I'm like, hey, I want you to give me a synthesis of my Google Calendar. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. And it goes through all my email, and it's like, here's what you did. I'm like, no, I want you to look at my calendar. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't access your calendar. And I'm like, so why? We can't. It's just so dumb.
It's challenging, but it's great at video. Well, you have that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think my ponder is, so there was a TEDx video that I watched last week or the week before talking about the amount of information that we consume. And in the juxtaposition of this is that it was the CDO of, I can't remember the name of the organization, from like 1923, like Save the Children, basically said like, people are not ungenerous, they're just overwhelmed. We have to be imaginative and creative. So like, and it was like in 1923, like people were overwhelmed, like people were too busy. And so like the founder of Save the Children, it says this is actually going to be in my deck tomorrow. So I'll have it rehearsed by then. But I'm like, wow, in 1923, people are overwhelmed and they're not ungenerous, but they're just not imaginative or creative. And we have to outdo that. And then a day or two later, I'm watching this TEDx, and it was a woman who was the first chief AI officer for a large publicly traded company. Her name is Saul. She had this slide in her TEDx that said, in the 1900s, knowledge doubled every 100 years. And think about like just all the knowledge that we would have. 1945, it doubled every 25 years. So the amount of knowledge that exists in the world today doubled every 25 years in 1945. But today, the amount of information that's created doubles every 12 hours. So if that was an issue in 1923, and people are distracted and unimaginative and overwhelmed, in that from a nonprofit person who's iconic in the sense of like created this very lasting, generational, but what's the right word? It's in multiple countries. So global nonprofit. I don't know why I'm struggling there. If that was the issue in 1923, imagine what it is now. And then if I, again, think about nonprofits, like how much does your fundraising program look the same way as it did a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago? If it looks even remotely the same, the rules have changed dramatically. Like if information doubles every 12 hours, like we're all overwhelmed. At the same time, so what the conclusion of all this, and I'll wrap up on the TEDx and just hearing all these different disparate things together, had made me really realize like I'm wasting away my life and just like looking down and scrolling through and I just want to consume it all. I'm reading stuff all the time and pinging stuff. And so really trying like in specific areas, like she talked about when she goes running, she does not bring her earpods anymore. She doesn't have her phone. She literally just is like at peace with her feet in the earth and looking out. So wherever that is for you, like ground yourself with the reality of what's around you. I think, what I was at an airport last week, and I think this all just hit home, and I looked across, I just kind of like scanned the place, and it made me so aware. And I'm not kidding, like 90% of people that I could see, and I mean, there's like hundreds of people, every person was looking down.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's sad, and and I'm part of that because it's just like the addiction of the algorithm and like what's there, what am I missing? So I'm making really conscious efforts at different parts, whether it was like I was in an airport yesterday and I was like, you know what, it was in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to sit here for like 40 minutes before my plane and not look at my phone. And look around and observe things in life the way we used to. And that's my ponder of the week. I think we really need to do that. We need to reconnect with the world around us because it's pretty magical.
Yeah. I mean, I told you this a couple of years ago, deleting social media apps off my phone. Just like at first, I still went to social media a lot, right? But I put up a barrier. Now I had to open up Safari. I had to go in, like the user experience wasn't the same. Yeah. But eventually, if I'm on Facebook once every 4 months, that's a lot, right? Yeah. And it's mostly just like looking up a business profile or like I'm not engaging. LinkedIn is now my rabbit hole.
Right. But even email, I mean, you get 120 emails a day, 70 Slack messages a day, 5,000 ad images a day, and it's all of that. I think unless we take conscious like things like that, like hide things, delete things, whatever, but also create mechanisms where you're like, if I'm doing this thing, there's going to be no technology in it. And I think I've shared this before. My neighbor is a chief AI officer and they have 45 acres. Their kids milk cows. They feed chickens. They don't have their own devices. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. So it gives me hope. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in for a 50-minute episode. We got it done in one episode.
We did.
We covered a lot, but I know next week there's just going to be as much.
If you're used to 30-minute, just listen to it at 1.5 speed. But this is the end of the episode.
But what if you're already listening to 1.5 speed? So then you're at 3x. So speaking of Mallory Erickson, that's how she listens to it. So you're at 3x speed, probably a little bit more tolerable. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in live from the Virtuous headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona. Scott and I are going to peace out, head to Machine Learning Week, get nerdy with those folks, and then be back here. We'll see you again next week.
Yeah. See you next time. Thanks.
Take care.